topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. So excited to be here with you because I'm here with you. And I cannot share with you how excited I am to share that when Amazon pushed out my last book, Expert to Influencer, it did really well. And part of the profits from our book sales go to kiva.org. So thank you to each and every one of you who has got our books and helped us help entrepreneurs all across the globe. And also, I'm going to invite you and encourage you to take that 1 hour of your time, whether it's in a week or whether it's in a month, and spread kindness and joy without any strings attached. And today, I want to highlight Kelly. So Kelly, shout out to you. She is one of our family in the audience, and she shared her kindness story. So what she shared was that she found out that a couple had moved next to her house and that it had been several months and they hadn't gotten to know each other. So since pandemic, people have not been in touch with each other as much as they used to be before. So what she did was she cooked them a really special meal and took it to their house and welcomed them. And she shared that not only the couple opened up, but now they are having dinners together, and couple found their way in the neighborhood group. So just a little thing can go a long way. So I invite you and share your stories, and we'll highlight you in our podcast. So let's welcome a guest. Welcome, Damon.
Divya, it's great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you, Damon. So Damon, usually we begin your story back when you were a child. So do you recall a moment or a person that left a mark on you and you remember them, or you remember that moment to this day?
Sure. I was really fortunate to have great parents and great friends. And so I have fond memories of my childhood. One memory that stands out, I was about 12 years old, and this was the mid-'80s. And at the time, my father was the head of a savings and loan in San Francisco. And we did something that was called, we're big sports fans, and he did what was called, he created Kids Opening Day. And what Kids Opening Day was, they bought 20,000 tickets, and they invited and bussed in all of these inner city kids who weren't as fortunate as we were to a Giants game, and we sectioned off part of the parking lot. And it was amazing to be able to give back, to see them give back, my family give back, and also help me understand that not everybody is as fortunate we are to be able to go to a Giants game or do something fun like that whenever we want. And it really struck a chord with me, and it was something that has stuck with me my whole life.
It's just amazing. when you shared that story, that how fortunate we are. And so many times we are sitting there complaining, and it can be as simple as weather, whereas there are so many things to be more grateful about. So, did you have any dreams when you were a young boy? You wanted to become a cop or a fireman, as usually, or something else?
Well, that's when I was in nursery school, I was Batman, and you had to call me. You had to call me Batman, or I wouldn't answer. My parents actually thought it was funny, but my teachers not so much so. And if you went to my mother's house today, there's a letter there saying, "Hey, it's great that your kid has a creative imagination, but we need to move past this Batman phase, and he needs to respond to Damon." And I think that it's cute because as I mentioned to you before, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my 2-year-old daughter went through the Elsa phase to be from Frozen, and my son, who we just recently took to his first movie, but good thing or not, is Marshall from Paw Patrol. So at that age, I was Batman. I was committed to being Batman. After that, had a small Star Wars phase, but my dream really was to be a professional baseball player after that.
Oh, fantastic. And we are talking about dreams. So, when you're a child, the whole world is open to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that you played baseball and put in a lot of hard work.
Yes, I grew up, and a main focus of my childhood was around sports, and I was really fortunate to be surrounded with great friends that even today, 45 years later, are still some of my very closest friends. And we played sports. A lot of our lives focused around sports in whatever season it was: baseball, football, soccer, basketball. And fast forward through high school, I played baseball and basketball, and I was lucky enough to be drafted. I was a high school American in baseball, and I was drafted with an opportunity to play for the Atlanta Braves, which I
Oh, wow.
which I turned down, and I went to college. But that was a unique experience.
Absolutely. So you talked about having that camaraderie, that, those friends are still your friends decades later. So many times what happens is that a lot of parents are debating whether to have their kids in sports or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of sports because it teaches you so many life lessons that help you through your career, through life, personal life, making money. I mean, each and every phase. So if there are parents who are debating about sports being one of the key things in their kids' lives, what would you tell them?
What I would tell them is absolutely get your kids in sports, get your kids into learning how to play an instrument. And a lot of times, even people come to me, and it's not so much because they want them to play sports or not. They will, but I think they specialize too much in one specific sport. They'll come to me and say, "I want my kid to be get a full scholarship like you did in baseball, so I have them playing baseball year round." My recommendation to them is to do the exact opposite, is that they should be more of a generalist, try different things, try jiu-jitsu, try soccer, do gymnastics, don't force your kid into pigeonholing them into one sport their whole time. I think that it causes burnout, but also you should just try different things. But first and foremost, get your kids into sports. But secondly, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Have them become well-rounded and try many different things.
No, and that's really, really good advice, because you and I being both in leadership,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very strong proponent of kids that, these are our next generation leaders. And when you start leaders in the making, when they're young, then the gap and the transition between that youth and adulthood is very smooth. So you mentioned that you had this great opportunity for baseball. So what was it that made you turn it down?
What made me turn it down was I I had a full ride opportunity to go to Pepperdine University, and I really for baseball, and I really believed in the vision that our coach Andy Lopez created. And he said that we're a small D1 university, but we're building a strong team, and I believe that you'd be a key component to it, and that we can win the World Series here. And not a lot of people would think. I know you mentioned you went to Cal State Fullerton, which was a huge baseball school. It was several trips to the College World Series, especially around when I was there. And Coach Lopez really got me excited to come to Pepperdine. The other reason was I was a little intimidated at 17 years old. I wasn't sure I was ready to go out to Pulaski, West Virginia, and start in a minor league career. I was really fortunate that my parents gave me 100% autonomy to make that decision. They said, this is your choice. We'll get behind you either way. And I ended up going the college route.
Well, that definitely makes sense. And that's helping you grow as a person. And that's so powerful that, your parents supported you in your journey. So as you moved from Pepperdine, what happened next? Where did your career or life take you?
Great. So I got to Pepperdine as a 17-year-old, and I was homesick. And I went from being a high school All-American to getting out onto the field, and everybody was as good as me at this point. And I got hurt, and I ended up leaving Pepperdine. And sure enough, which is funny, is they ended up winning the College World Series the year I left. Which is great. But it was a great experience. I bounced around colleges, and then I ended up at Arizona State. I played baseball at Arizona State. In my book that I wrote, I talk a lot about. I had the chance to play for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches, and it really helped me model my leadership skills after what I've learned from playing for them. And so at Arizona State, I had a good career. I was ready to move on to the next step. And then I didn't get drafted again. And then here I was, 22 years old, and I was at the crossroads. I'm like, well, what am I? I didn't know if my skills were transferable or not, and into the business world. And for the first time, I was really, I kind of identified as a baseball player all these years. Now that dream was gone for me. So now it was time to figure out, what was next.
Right. You mentioned that you worked with 3 Hall of Fame coaches, and I can definitely appreciate that how coaches can inspire and literally shape athletes. What would you say were 2 or 3 things that you learned from them that have stayed with you for the rest of your life?
Great question. Going back to the first coach that I just spoke about, Andy Lopez, is he had 2 rules, and only 2. 1 was show up on time, and 2 was do the right thing. So show up on time is pretty self-explanatory. You just get there early, you don't be late. And then number 2, do the right thing. Well, that can be a lot broader. And sometimes the kids on the team, him and I reconnected, and we talked about this a couple months ago. And he said, well, Coach Lopez, what does that mean? And you know what he said? You know what that means. Be principled, do the right thing when nobody else is around, and do it with integrity. So those are 2 things I learned. And then later on, I played for a gentleman named Jim Brock, who was going through the final stages of cancer as a coach. And he literally died during the College World Series that I played in. And I just learned from him, number 1, life is short, but number 2, how courageous he was to show up like he did for his team and in the battle he put on. So those are the great things I've learned. I've also played for other coaches that weren't as impressive. And, I had one coach, doesn't really matter who it was, but they took all the wins themselves. And like, if something went really well, instead of making it about their team and celebrating their team, they took a lot of the accolades. And then if something didn't go wrong, they pushed out all the blame and on the team. And that was a lesson that I took to heart, and I try to do the opposite of. I try with my team and I try to, share with our customers too, to make the wins about your team members, the people who report to you. And then if something goes wrong, you take the accountability yourself for it, and support your team. So those are some of the lessons.
Yeah, and as you mentioned that here was Andy Lopez who predicted that, we are going to go into the World Series, shared the vision with you and achieved it. And then there were some who were just out there to look out for themselves. And here you were, like that 22-year-old, wondering whether the skills were transferable. And what you're sharing is it's almost like you're taking the words out of any leadership principles or approach, and how equitable and they're just like so interchangeable. So now you're here, a 22-year-old. I can just kind of imagine you kind of sitting there on the cusp of life and like wondering, so what did you decide, and where did your life take you?
Well, I was very fortunate. I came from a family who had multiple successful businesses. We were a large real estate company, and but I was kind of intimidated again, and so my father was an entrepreneur, and he came up with this idea for a computer training school, which was Learn It back in the day. And it was opening up in June of '95, and that's right around when my college career was ending. And so I started off at Learn It as a receptionist. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, because I wanted to prove that I wasn't just handed something in my family's business. I wanted to work my way up. And two is I wanted to really learn the business. And so I started off at the ground level. And so I fast forward over 6 years at Learn It, I was able to teach classes. I did sales, and about in year 7, when they were looking for a new CEO, I kind of threw my hat in the ring and was given the opportunity. And I've been doing that. I've been running Learn It for now for the last 21 years. So we've been in business 28 years.
Congratulations. And it's always a pleasure to hear when mom and pops or individual businesses are in business for a long period of time. So you mentioned that, you threw your name in the hat, worked your way up. So what would you say is the difference between learn it all versus know it all leader?
So look at the learn it all mentality versus the know it all mentality. And first, my definition of a leader isn't necessarily mean that you have to manage a large team. You don't have to manage 50 people, 10 people, or 100 people. Anybody can be a leader, and and it's all about being accountable. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, whether you're an individual contributor at work, it's about how you carry yourself. And so that's really my definition of what a leader is. Now, you look at learn it all versus know it all, and I kind of feel like most of us are a little bit of both in some domains. In some domains, you can be a know-it-all, and in some learn it all. But for me, a know-it-all is somebody who kind of comes in and they have all the answers. They have it all figured out, and they're very convinced that their way about doing something is the best way, and they're not really open-minded to ideas. The opposite is a learn it all. You come in like a child with a beginner's mind, and you're open, and sometimes you're even able to challenge your opinions and your thoughts. Like, is this really the best way to do something? Is there a different way to do it? I think curiosity plays a lot into it, and you're curious, and you're looking for ways to evolve and get better. So and you're continuing to want to grow and develop. So really, in my opinion, that's the difference between a learn it all mindset and a know it all mentality.
Absolutely. And the way I see it is that I'm a lifelong learner, because no matter wherever you are at, you can't know it all. There's always another layer to peel. And I really liked one of the things that you mentioned, coming with curiosity. coming with that openness, because when you create that space for things to be open and allowing other people to also develop as leaders, it's always surprising to me how other perspectives can come in and how much you can learn every single day. So you mentioned in one of your trajectories that you are not sure about learn it all and that you wanted to work your way up. And you also talk about imposter syndrome. Did you ever experience, or as you have been training others, you have seen that?
Absolutely. And I think all of us experience imposter syndrome at some point in your life. And well, I think that if somebody tells you they haven't, they may not necessarily be telling the truth. And my first real big experience with imposter syndrome, which taught me a lot, was when things didn't work out at Pepperdine, and I went on to Arizona State, and I said, "This is my last chance. How do I make a difference here?" And I kind of came up with a 3-step approach that I've carried through to my business career. And that 3-step approach for overcoming imposter syndrome is one. Well, first you got to identify what your fears are and what you're worried about. And then the first step is to work hard. And I don't mean 10 to 15 hours a day, but put in the repetition. Do the work. I don't think there's any substitute or shortcuts for that. Number 2 is focus. And it's easy to procrastinate when something's difficult and go a different direction, but really focus, do the deliberate practice that's required to help overcome what you're trying to accomplish. And number 3, once you have put in the hard work and you've prepared and you've focused, then, kind of let go and just learn from it. You go in, say you have to give a big speech or a sales presentation or whatever it is that you're concerned about, or you're in a new role and you're not sure if you're qualified to be promoted into this management role. But if you put in the hard work, the focus, and the preparation, then just let go. And now it's time to just give it your best shot. And, sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but I think you have the opportunity to learn from all of them. And that's just really the approach that I've shared with our customers and with I've always used for myself when I get into a position of whether or not I belong or whether or not I'm good enough to be doing something.
Well, it's a very powerful approach, Damon, because think about it. You're talking about the repetition and the way our brains are designed. Repetition is the key to create a good, healthy habit, regardless whether it's for your living your life or whether it is to creating a skill set to achieve your goals. So when you talk about repetition and showing up for yourself and then the focus, when you're talking about the focus, the 2 words, deliberate practice, that brings in mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are bringing in that deliberate practice, it brings that habit, and then you're moving from doing to being. So very, very powerful. So now while you're doing this, fear is going to step in.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about purposeful awfulizing it. So while this is happening, how can they use that technique to overcome it?
Interesting. So the term purposeful awfulizing, I talk a little bit about that in my book, is let's say it comes more into like decision making. Let's say you have a big decision to come up with, whether it's where you want to go to college, or do I take this new role at work, or I take this job, and I look at it and you say, what is the worst case scenario? A lot of times we like to look at things from a very positive perspective, like everything's rosy, like what's the best outcome we can have? I try to look at it and not to be negative, but let's look at it. Let's fast forward a year, and what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And you look at that worst case scenario, and if that happens, can you live with it? And if it's a situation in work where let's say we were looking to acquire a company, but if it goes south, it's going to put us out of business. Well, that's not something we can live with. So at that case, you want to go back to the drawing board and find other alternatives. But if it's a situation you can live with, then it's time to make that decision, be decisive, and move forward. So that's really how I utilize the tool of, I know there's other ways to call it, but we call it purposeful awfulizing, looking at the worst case scenario and what the outcomes would be if it happened.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense that, okay, here you are making a decision. And when you're making a decision, what's the worst thing that could happen? And if you can live with it, then you're not fantasizing or imagining the worst case, so many different worst case scenarios going through your head. All right, this is what I can deal with. This is what I cannot deal with. Make that decision. Now, so many times what happens is that when you are making that decision, there are a few things that kind of play into it. So one is that, okay, what kind of experience I'm going to get? And then there may be a place where you have that environment where you can express yourself, which is the potential. So when people are deciding between the two, in your opinion, which one is the better one to go with?
Well, I think it's something to look at. What can I learn from this opportunity? If I move forward with this decision and I fail, what can I learn and grow from and evolve? I'm curious, what do you think the best way to go about it would be?
So the way I look at it is it's so individual. There's no,
Absolutely.
for me, every individual is different. They're raised in different circumstances, different situations, exposed to different people, and the dreams and skill sets and capacity is so different that the key is to sit down and reflect where you are at.
Yeah.
And what works really best for you. So this is, again, going back to what you mentioned. What's the worst thing that can happen? What you can live with? Because so many times we're sitting in the seat of judgment and like, oh, that person should have done, especially if you're watching a movie.
Right.
I do it just like anybody else. Like, oh, when you get so engrossed in the character. So similarly, when we are looking at other people's, it's always about what is the demand? Like, what is the life demanding out of you? And what is that you can supply? What's your capacity? Now, that doesn't mean you cannot go for potential or you cannot go for experience. It's just about the growth and learn it all, as you mentioned earlier.
I'm also a big, this kind of gets back to, managing a team and working with your customers, or even for yourself, is I'm a big fan of focusing on somebody's strengths over their weaknesses. You have an employee, they're really strong at one aspect of their job. And I think that you have a lot better chance of, for relatively low impact, focusing on that, make them better at that, than really trying to focus on their weaknesses as well. I think that a lot of people try to improve weaknesses, but I focus on people's strengths.
Yeah, because you're building their capacity in that area. And as you're building their capacity, it brings them confidence. Because when you're strong in something and you're performing, you are getting high performance. And as a result, you're getting the results. And when you get the results, that builds your confidence. And it keeps on, it's a repetitive process. So you talk about that it's really important to treat your team as a family and nurture them. Have you had experience personally in that or helped anybody else out with that?
Well, how I look at it is I look at my organization more as a team than a family. Now, I get to know them, very well outside of work. And I think it's important to be curious. And you speak a lot about here, kindness, and doing little things for your team that would help them and show that you care for them as humans, as individuals. And at the end of the day, I think it's our responsibility and our customers' responsibility to assemble the best team possible, to put the best team possible on the playing field for your customers and your other coworkers. And sometimes that means that your employees, sometimes they outgrow your business, and it's time for that, and it's time for them to move on. And sometimes, as an organization, you outgrow them, and need to, let's say, what's called top grade your team and bring other people in. So I don't think a family, Uncle Bob, you can never get rid of Uncle Bob. He's always coming to your Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. But in a business sense, that I prefer to look at it as a team and assemble the best team possible.
No, it definitely makes sense. It's again, when we go back to the analogy of sports, that if somebody has outgrown, then they will definitely go to higher division or get drafted. But if somebody is bringing the rest of the team down, then it's time for them to move on and the team to bring in fresh talent. So that definitely makes sense. And as you're bringing in new talent, so now that thing comes in, that when you're making these hard decisions, how can you build that trust with your employees that you have their best interests at heart while you're keeping the eye on the organization and the profits?
I think that's a great question. And we talked earlier about, learn it all versus know it all. I think learn it all leaders are individuals who, there's the old saying, A players hire A players. I want to always surround myself and encourage our customers and the other leaders at my organization to surround yourself with talent and people who are better than you, who have diverse opinions, who can maybe even challenge the way things are being led. But in order to do that, when you bring them in, you also have to give them, first you have to onboard them, but you also have to give them the space to be able and the autonomy to do their work, what you hired them for. If you bring in a talented individual, but you constantly micromanage them and you limit their ability to be successful, they're not going to stay very long with you and they're going to move on. So to create a great positive culture, you want to bring in people who are better than you, don't feel challenged by them, and give them the space and opportunity, and kind of like what Learn It does, invest in learning and training opportunities for them to evolve for their personal growth. That, in my opinion, is what creates great teams and a great positive culture.
Definitely. Some really great nuggets over here. So as you're building trust, you mentioned about trust tax. Tell us a little bit about that.
So trust tax. So what I look at when I say the trust tax is that you go into every relationship believing in the individual that it's going to be a positive and they have the best intentions. And it's much better to go in relationships that way than it is to come into a relationship, cynicism or skeptical. And now the trust tax is going to take place when, sometimes you're going to get let down. And this can be a personal relationship. This could be a professional relationship. And I would like to say that over the years, yes, I've been let down. Either people do it on purpose or they just don't know any better. But overall, that if you go into relationships and you give people the benefit of the doubt and you come in trusting them, then the trust tax is the percentage of times that it's not going to work out. And it's just kind of like what happens. You got to pay that tax. But as a leader and, as a father and everything else, I think it's better to go into relationships thinking the best of individuals. What's your approach to engaging in a new relationship, professionally or personally?
You covered quite a bit. And for me, it's all about understanding that person, listening, not just hearing, listening to understand. And when you listen to understand, and then bringing in the intention to provide value, regardless whatever form it is, whether even if it is a 10-minute interaction or a half an hour interaction, or it's when you do that, it opens up space for building a relationship that is built on very strong foundation. And then you don't have to work on it later down the road because you're building the foundation as you're going along.
Good answer.
So as you continued in your role of CEO, tell us what is the next phase for Learn It All? When did you write your book?
So I wrote my book it took me a couple of years, but it came out in April of this year. And really what inspired me to write it was, one, I love to be able to give back, especially to individuals relatively new in their career or new managers, or people who are just excited about the opportunity for growth. And then the other was, the other reason what inspired me was, like I mentioned, I have 2 young kids, and they never got an opportunity to meet their grandfather, Walt. And I wanted to share with them the legacy that and all the positive impact that him and my mother have had on individuals over the year. I mean, we've trained and upskilled close to 2 million people at Learn It. So, speaking about confidence, one of the things that I think that upskilling does for individuals is gives them more confidence in their professional life and their personal life. And that's something that I'm really grateful for having been able to do. And I really enjoy working with our customers and our team. And the next phase of Learn It is just to continue to evolve as an organization to better serve our customers and find new and inventive ways to help make the learning sticky, and to help improve retention through a lot of these tools out there that are there today. Incorporate them with our instructor-led training.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. So what's the name of your book and where can people find it?
So the name of my book is The Learn It All Leader, Mindset, Traits, and Tools. And you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of those regular places. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Damon Lembi. And I'll even send me a message and I'll shoot you a free class if you want to attend one of our classes on anything from Microsoft Excel to an emotional intelligence class.
That's powerful. So Damon, when you talked about to kind of, as we bring it home, what would you say is the next vision for Learn It for your company?
I would say that what we're really into is working on changing habits and changing behavior. So continue to build out our content that can help in that direction. And it's holistically, we do a lot of leadership skills, but we also have started to get into workplace wellness over the last couple of years. And because I think that what takes place outside of work can affect your day-to-day work career and vice versa. So it's really understanding and be ahead of the game as far as what our customers and our employees are looking for and evolving in that direction. That's the big steps for us.
Very powerful, because when you're feeling well, then you will definitely perform. And so many times what has happened that in the previous few decades, we had moved away from wellness, and it's like work it all, just kind of like you got to work was at the top of the list. And now since pandemic, we are coming back to it, that it's important to have that work-life harmony and have that wellness and expand yourself in all directions. So great job. Do you have any parting thoughts for our audience?
My parting thoughts for your audience is that in listening to some of these episodes is the importance of kindness. And my parting thoughts are, next time you're at the grocery store or with a barista at Starbucks, just look somebody in the eye, ask them their name, and tell them thank you for doing a good job. I don't think people realize how far that goes. And the same thing, let's take that back. If you're managing a team, make an effort to call a couple people a week and just tell them how grateful you are for the work that they do. That's something I try to do, and it goes a long way.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being with us on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for being part of our show, because without you, our show would not be possible. Reach out. As always, we are here to serve you and support you to live the life you want and the life you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible.
Thanks, Juan.
See you, and be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.